Sex becomes a god like anything else becomes a god. When a good thing like sex becomes a bad thing like adultery. Think about all the good things in life that we distort. Wine. That's a good thing. What does the church do with it? We set up fences around it and we invent grape juice for communion. And we say, let's just avoid it all completely together. Wine is actually a good thing. Paul tells Timothy, take some more wine for your stomach. Jesus turned water into what? Kool-Aid. Into wine. The best wine, by the way. The best wine. We are told when we get to heaven, we're going to sit around a table. Guess what we're going to be drinking? Diet Mountain Dew. Wine. We're going to be drinking wine. Wine's a good thing. When you take too much wine, what does it turn into? A bad thing. It turns into AA meetings. It turns into destroyed marriages, wrecked relationships. What about food? Food is a great thing. I love food. I'm getting ready to go away this week for a little bit. I can't wait to eat some good food. Food's a good thing, but it can turn into a bad thing. Especially when you visit pretty much any restaurant these days, it's pretty much a bad thing, unless you're splitting the plate like 6 different ways. It turns into a bad thing when you're eating a bunch of fat and a bunch of calories and you're eating it all the time. It can turn, I know it's a sensitive issue for many of us. We're one of the heavier nations and more unhealthy nations in the world, and it's sensitive for all of us, but it's still a sin. When we eat too much and we're gluttonous, the scriptures name that right alongside of homosexuality, by the way. And murderers, and sexual immorality. Food becomes a bad thing. The same thing as with sex. It's a really great thing. Like wine, like food, a fine wine, a nice steak. Sex is a good thing. You take it out of its context, it becomes preeminent, you become preoccupied with it, it becomes a bad thing. Taking it out of its context. I am biking now, as I've shared with you, so you'll hear some illustrations about biking. And when you start biking on the road, you have to get all the gear. You got to get the helmet, you got to get those nice sunglasses, you got to get the heart rate monitor, the computer, so you can see how far you're going. You got to get the shoes that clip into the pedals so you can be like Lance Armstrong out there. And then you also have to buy these tight biker clothes. I thought about wearing them on underneath here and just kind of ripping it off, but that would end the sermon right away. You got to buy the biker shorts. You got the biker pad in there. You need that pad. It's going to be a thick pad. And you need the biker shirt. And so all of a sudden, you're there in all your glory, pretty much, in these biker clothes. Now, you put a man on a bike with the biker stuff on, he doesn't look bad, all right? Just don't stare too long. He doesn't look bad. He looks like he's doing what he should be doing. He's wearing what he should be wearing in the context that he should be wearing it. He's got his biker clothes on. It's not all that offensive. Now, if you take the same man and you take him off his bike and bring him here to preach, it can damage your psyche. If you're looking at the man with the tight clothes on and the tight stuff on, all of a sudden it's out of context, isn't it? And that's kind of like marriage. Let me use another, or like sex out of the context of marriage. Let me use another illustration. A couple of years ago, actually it was more than a couple of years ago, about 15 years ago, my wife and I, we were on a date, and we decided to go back to my parents' house and cook her a nice dinner. We're going to start a nice fire. And so this isn't going where you think it's going, by the way. And I started the fire in my parents' house, and we had a nice dinner going on. We're sitting by the fire. We're just talking. We were being pure, sitting there talking, and all of a sudden I hear a rustling in the fireplace. It's like, what is going on in that fireplace? So I get very close to the fireplace, and I can still hear the rustling. Fire's roaring. All of a sudden, a squirrel jumps up right in my face onto the chains. He's like, help me. I jump back screaming. He's like, kill it! Kill it! So we closed him in there. Aww. What happens if that squirrel gets out with its tail on fire and starts running around my parents' house? Dad, I burnt down your house. Well, actually, I didn't. The squirrel burned it down. So I started thinking, if that squirrel gets out, he's on fire, and he was on fire, and starts running around the house, catching the house on fire. I thought it'd be better for him to die. It's better for one man to die than for me to get in trouble. And so the squirrel died of smoke inhalation. It was funny, when we actually picked it up out of the fire, put it into a trash bag, it literally started to melt through, its hand coming through. Oh, it was horrible. I know. The next night, he was on my window ledge outside and he was tapping on it. Tink, 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 tink. Squirrel on fire, you'll remember this for the rest of your life, is like sex outside the context of marriage. It'll burn the house down. And it really is. And it's what happens is we turn sex into a god. We take it out of its context. We say, I want sex more than I want to glorify God. That's what we do. I want this kind of sex, or this sex with this person who isn't my wife, who isn't my husband, more than I want to worship God. That's when we take something that's created, we turn it into a god. All idolatry, Ezekiel 14:3 tells us, it begins not with your hands, but in your heart. That's why I said earlier, everything we've talked about leading up to this point is the foundation for where we're headed now. Because what is in your heart is going to determine literally what is going to happen with your hands. What your sexual life is going to look like, how you're going to view sex. And so, what is in your heart? Isn't that the question this morning? Do I want to glorify God? If you're single this morning, do I want to glorify God more than my sexual urges? If you're married and you view sex as a god, do I want to glorify God more than I want to worship this sex, this act, this gift that God has given us?